Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Nostradamus, possibly the most famous prophet in the Western world, but he remains a pretty enigmatic figure. He has produced some tantalizing work, but he doesn't really have all that many hits, just like many other prophets. One of the things you have to understand about Nostradamus was he started off as an apothecary. For those of you who don't know what an apothecary is, and no judgment here, there's words there's words people run across every day. But he was basically a really, really primitive version of a pharmacist, mixing potions and stuff like that. The church didn't like him talking about his prophecies, but the Medici family rather liked him. He wrote, well, he had an interesting writing style. He liked quatrains, and quatrains are a series of four verses with the same rhythm. They can rhyme, and indeed, he took advantage of puns in Greek and Latin, all sorts of things, to make sure that they would be as interesting and as enigmatic as possible. Because remember, this is one of the times where the Catholic Church was particularly interested in getting rid of people that diverged from their dogma. And also, royal families usually don't like prophets. The reason is if this person can tell the future, they can tell my future. And if it's a good future, they could work towards sabotaging it. And if it's a bad future, maybe they can make it work sooner. So that's the atmosphere Nostradamus was working in. There's a few stories on how he did his work. The one I find most convincing is he sat and stared at a bowl of water. This doesn't sound particularly convincing until you realize he was doing his doing his thing in the 1500s. So there's no electricity. There's no nice soft light that he can turn on and off. So that means candlelight. And given the religious preoccupation of the time, it's not hard to imagine that he would have some incense. He was an apothecary. He could make his own incense, and things like opium and frankincense would be mixed in together. I don't know if that was exactly what he used. He didn't say anything because he was assuming he was speaking to a fellow audience of educated people for the 1500s. And just mentioning incense, they would know exactly what he meant. Or maybe he had his own private blend. But just establishing that alternate atmosphere in a sacred place. Oh, I also need to mention he did these readings at night because anybody seeing him do that would probably think he was a little bit nutty. And especially if he starts writing afterwards. So that's Nostradamus's MO, method of operation. You can very easily get all sorts of crazy premonitions, visions by staring at a lake. That's why people do it. Because the water is always shifting. By candlelight, it's it's like doubling the potency of it. And he was probably preparing himself by fasting or you know meditating beforehand to get himself in the right mood. There's a device called a psychomantium, and it's basically a mirror that's mounted just above your eye level so you can't see yourself in it. And you sit in the chair and you look at it and you try not to fall asleep, but people have reported some pretty fantastic visions. And it's a mirror. Water, which probably is rippling slightly with the candlelight effect, would be something similar. So I don't doubt Nostradamus' method. It's not like he's saying, oh, an angel appeared to me and told me this. No, no. He's documenting a particular procedure, a ritual, if you like, or maybe even a scientific method. Now, how accurate was he? Hard to tell. Very hard to tell because he doesn't have solid hits. He has things that sound like they might be true, but it's all in the interpretation. He has two quatrains that seem to be indicating the rise of Hitler 400 years earlier than it actually happened. And this is a translation. I was going to try and pull up the French and look at it, but nah, I'm not that invested. But here's the two quatrains. From the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop, his fame will increase towards the realm of the east. Beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister. Into a cage of iron will the great one be drawn, when the child of Germany observes nothing. Like I said, this is definitely something to consider a hit. Hitler was born into very poor circumstances. His father was a customs inspector, I believe. Not a very high income job. The father was also apparently a raving drunk and would come home, beat his kid and everything. But in the 1800s, that's not such a rare thing. Does it make it right? But I'm saying you would probably be considered strange if you didn't hit your children. Aren't we glad we live in 2024? Nobody could argue that Hitler's tongue was his best weapon. He could drive people into a frenzy. In fact, it seemed to be a big thing in the 1940s. Well, the 30s and the 40s. You got Truman with his fireside chats. You had Stalin with his speeches. Mussolini gave his. Churchill and other leaders were expected to give these public addresses. So that's pretty dead on. Um, his fame will increase towards the realm of the East. What's another word for fame? Influence. And if we consider that even though this was translated by a professional, at least somebody better than me, I know that people will use words to fit their poems, and a quatrain is still a poem. So, by analogy, seems that he got it right there. Beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. And that could describe virtually any war, especially considering what a World War II machine would look like to somebody in the 1500s. They wouldn't have even the context to figure it out. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister. Hmm, true. They were surrounded on all sides, but mm, that's where things stop being easy. Into a cage of iron, the Great One will be drawn. Now, we assume here that Hister is the one that Nostradamus is talking about. And you can draw the connection to the end of Hitler's lifetime in the bunker. And he was drawn in there for his own safety, and that's where his safety ended. So that sounds pretty darn convincing. When the child of Germany observes nothing. There's a few ways you can look at that. Um, when the child of Germany observes nothing. Now, Hitler is an Austrian. He took over Germany, but he was an Austrian. But he considered himself an ethnic German. Overall, it's pause for thought. It's a definite hit. You have to wonder if he was seeing that in his mind and trying to make it work. Because he has no idea what a, a soldier looks like in the 20th century. He has no idea what any of this would be. A rally is not something that really happened. People would gather to listen to speeches, but at the same token, if you were in the capital or if you had reason to go there, then you might stop by and look at the royalty parading past. It's a completely different world. That's all I'm going to say. And even World War II is a completely different world. I would like to move on to another supposed hit. 9/11. Now, Nostradamus is working in the 1500s. The New World is a concept. Yes, some people have been there, but it's kind of like a voyage to the moon is for us now. It's something we can do, but we have to have a reason, a motivation to go there. For context, this is only one quatrain. In the city of God there will be a great thunder. Two brothers torn apart by chaos while the fortress endures. The great leader will succumb. The third big war will begin when the big city is burning. A lot of people try to make this a prediction of 9/11. I don't think anybody would call New York the city of God. No offense to any New Yorkers that might be listening, but yeah, that's not your reputation. Two brothers torn apart by chaos while the fortress endures. You could stretch that as the Twin Towers, two brothers. But I'm pretty sure Nostradamus wouldn't use that even as a pun. It's completely misleading. And third part, the great leader will succumb. Well, not at that point. As far as I know, all the leadership is still alive aside from Osama bin Laden, and that was much further on when he was finally captured. The third big war will begin while the big city is burning. Well, New York didn't burn. The Twin Towers burned. Most of New York wasn't having its best day, but it wasn't burning. Third big war, thank goodness, has not happened. We can also look at another one of his prophecies about that's attributed to the same thing. Two steel birds will fall from the sky on the metropolis. The sky will burn at 45 degrees latitude. Fire approaches the great new city. Immediately, a huge scattered flame leaps up. Within months, rivers will flow with blood. The undead will roam the earth for a little time. This starts off pretty fascinating, but it, it drops off the scale of reality pretty quickly. The two steel birds. Well, we know there were a lot more than two jet aircraft, and steel birds, yeah, from the 1500s, makes sense. The sky will burn at 45 degrees latitude. New York is at 40 degrees north latitude. Close. I mean, I'm impressed enough he knew about latitude and longitude and was able to pull that out. So 5 degrees, okay, I'm willing to forgive that. Fire approaches the great new city. Well, New York was new in the 1600s. So maybe from his perspective, it was a new city, assuming he could comprehend everything else. Immediately, a huge scattered flame leaps up. Eh, you can describe the explosion that way. You can twist a lot of things, like the collapse of the seventh tower, into this. It's a stretch, but it's possible. Here's where we go off the deep end. Within months, the rivers will flow with blood. Well, we know that didn't happen. Or at least no one I've ever talked to or read or anything has reported that. The undead will roam the earth for a little time. Mm, I missed that part. Unless you're gonna tie it into a movie or a TV show or something, this just simply did not happen. So it's a hit provided you really contort things and leave things out. So that's our problem with Nostradamus. He's he's talented. There's no question he's talented. His writings are vague enough that you can put them into almost any scenario, but that's the problem. We still don't know whether he was using codes. We don't know what was a pun and what wasn't. And it's solely his success is solely in the eyes of the beholder. With that, we'll give Nostradamus a rest for now. I think we'll come back to him at another point. But for now, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, because sharing is caring. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Don't forget to click the bell icon down below so that way you'll be notified every time we put up a new episode, usually noon every day. And we hope you have a fantastic day.